Welcome everybody to this Sunday morning service here at Salt and Light Christian Church. The story that I have to tell you all this morning is about the man Lee Strobel. Lee was born in 1952 and had quite a secular upbringing. He, as a youth, he didn't really want anything to do with God or religion or Christianity. And as he grew up, he formulated his own opinions and became a staunch atheist. And not just an atheist who didn't believe in the existence of God, obviously, but the kind of atheist that would argue adamantly with Christians against the existence of God. However, Lee was a very logically thinking person. And so, ruling out the possibility of there being an all-powerful creator God and an afterlife and a judgment day, he figured, if this life is all I have, I might as well make the best of it. And as a young man, he lived essentially for the sake of his own pleasure. This often led him to the bottom of a bottle, and unfortunately, he became not just a chronic drunk, but also a very angry person. He kept chasing the next, better thing, the better carnal pleasure, essentially, and failing to ever really get to the point he wanted to. Everything kept disappointing him. And this grew inside of him as resentment. And so, however, he was not just logical, but quite intelligent. He ended up going to college and studying law and journalism. And afterwards, after college, he became a journalist at a renowned newspaper in Chicago. And this newspaper, the group that worked on it, credited themselves with being very meticulous in their work. They refused to print anything that didn't have at least 3 sources backing it up. And they were adamant about telling the truth and knowing for sure that it was true before printing it. However, while he was successful from a worldly standpoint, looking at his life from the outside, his family life was quite chaotic. His wife was agnostic at the time. She had never heard the gospel and didn't discount the existence of God, but never really searched for him. And their young daughter, really only knew her father for the first 5 years of her life as this angry, drunken person that she didn't want to be around much. However, at one point in their lives, Lee's wife ended up meeting a friend and befriending this woman through her work who was a Christian. And her friend began telling her about Christ and preaching the gospel to her. And she was very interested and intrigued by the gospel message, and she would ask questions about God and heaven and Jesus and the Bible. And eventually she even started going to church with her friend. And through the Holy Spirit drawing her nearer to him, she eventually gave her life to Christ and became a Christian. However, when she went and told Lee what she had done, the choice she had made, how God had changed her heart, he was infuriated. He was mortified. he couldn't have imagined this ever happening to him or his family. And he almost left his wife and daughter because of it. However, he stuck through for a few months longer, trying, hoping that this was just some kind of fad or a period of time that she would grow out of and come back to her senses. However, that wasn't the case. As she continued to grow as a Christian, Lee continued to grow in his anger against God and against her. And he got to the point where he just adamantly, he just wanted his wife back. He wanted his old wife back, the woman who would partake in their sinful lifestyle with him. And so he thought to himself that if he could discredit this Christianity stuff, if he could disprove the resurrection of Christ, then her whole belief would fall apart and unravel, and she would come back to him. And so he set out on a mission to disprove Christianity. And as a journalist, he knew exactly how to do this. He went through all of the records, the biblical historical documents, as well as non-biblical or extra-biblical documents for the time, and he researched adamantly, looking for any thread that he could tug to just get this to begin unraveling. And months went by as he studied this. And after collecting all of the evidence and collaborating it, he looked at the execution of Christ. He knew for sure that Christ had lived and that Jesus had died on a Roman cross and was executed. However, he also knew for sure that the tomb, Jesus' tomb, was empty. Even the Jewish leaders knew the tomb was empty. They just disagreed on how it became that way. And so he got to the point where he was looking at all of these eyewitness accounts of Christ's life and his resurrection. And one day, he sat there with all of these documents in front of him, all of this evidence, and something clicked in his mind that he didn't want to believe this to be true, but for the first time in his life, he was being intellectually dishonest with himself. And so, coming to the realization that the evidence pointed to the fact that Christ was and is who he said he was, he finally admitted to himself that he believed. However, he knew that belief wasn't enough. He knew that there was more to salvation than just believing. He knew he had to accept as well. And so that day, he got on his knees and he prayed to God, a God he wasn't even sure existed. He prayed and asked, saying, "Lord, if you are real, come into my heart and change me." And that day, Lee Strobel became a Christian. And from then on, his life began to change. He stopped doing those sinful, wicked things that he had done his whole life. He stopped chasing his own carnal desires and even began going to church with his wife. And slowly, the change in his life became obvious to those around him. So much so that his little 5-year-old daughter, who had only known her father to be this drunken, angry man, saw that something was different about him. And one Sunday morning, she went to her mom, and she said to her mom, "I want God to do for me what he has done for my dad. And that morning, just a few months after Lee became a Christian, his daughter also was saved. His son that they had later, would also become a Christian. And both his daughter and his son would grow up to be adamant Christians in the ministry. And even to this day, his grandchildren are continuing that legacy, working in the ministry today. And so, Lee Strobel's life is a beautiful example of how God can work through anyone and save a family to lead more people to Christ. So thank you. Let's bring the music up.